The Malthari homeworld burned. From orbit, Commander Malvar watched through the crystalline viewport of his command spire as the enemy's bioluminescent siege beams carved across the planet's surface. The once gleaming cities of flowing aerogel and wind-carved towers now lay in ruins, their pale violet auroras drowned beneath the crimson fire of annihilation. His people had never been warriors. Their technology was elegant, streaming purple, white energy harnessed from atmospheric ionization, translucent crystalline structures that sang in the solar winds. But beauty was no shield against slaughter. The Galactic Accord had abandoned them. One by one, their allies had withdrawn, citing neutrality, pragmatism, the cold calculus of war. The Malthari had no fleet to speak of, no weapons beyond their atmospheric condensers and harmonic resonators, tools of peace turned to desperate, futile defense. Malvar's secondary limbs trembled as he gripped the command dais. The last transmission from the surface had been Thalolan, his oldest friend, voice fractured with grief. They're breaking through the southern shield nexus we have, perhaps ours. There was nothing left to do but one final act of defiance. Open the deep frequency array, Malvar ordered, his voice hollow. The bridge crew turned, their silver-veined faces reflecting the same despair. Commander, the Accord forbids. I know, Malvar exhaled, the bioluminescent nodes along his spine dimming. But the Accord is not here, and we are dying. The array hummed to life, its crystalline panels unfolding like the petals of some long-dead flower. It was an ancient design, meant for scientific observation, listening to the whispers of the cosmos. Now, it would scream, broadcast on all frequencies, no encryption, no restrictions. He closed his eyes. Let the universe hear us beg. The signal traveled for months. Through the void, past dead stars and silent empires, it pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Most civilizations ignored it, some recorded it for study, a few laughed. Humanity listened. Major Jessica Vala stood in the dim glow of the Soul Defense Command holotank, arms crossed, as the transmission played for the third time. The Malthari's voice, Thalolan's voice, was translated into clipped English, but the desperation needed no translation. We are the Malthari. We are being exterminated. Our world burns. Our children die. If any hear this, if any still hold honor, we ask for aid. Not for conquest, not for glory, only to witness, to remember us. Silence hung in the room. Sergeant Richard Langford shifted beside her, his jaw tight. They're losing. Jessica didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the holographic wreckage of Malthari cities, the enemy's warships hovering like carrion birds. She had seen this before. Not the same species, not the same weapons, but the same story. The strong devouring the weak. Command's position? Langford asked. Officially neutral, the Accords got half the galaxy locked in non-interference treaties. And unofficially, Jessica smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. They told me to assess feasibility, Langford snorted. Feasibility, right. She turned to the holotank, tapping a command. The display shifted, pulling back to show the strategic map, the Malthari homeworld, the enemy fleet positions, the projected routes. Humanity had no obligation to act, no treaties, no debts. But then, they never waited for permission. Get the Oblivion's edge prepped, Jessica said softly. We're going hunting. The Malthari homeworld had been beautiful once. Jessica Vala knew this not from records, not from the fragmented transmissions still bleeding through the void, but from the way the dying planet resisted its fate. Even now, as the enemy's orbital lances carved glowing wounds across its surface, the world fought back. Auroras bled through the smoke, choked atmosphere, purple, white and desperate, like the last gasps of a drowning creature. The crystalline spires of their cities, those that still stood, glimmered defiantly, their flowing organic architecture now fractured, half melted by plasma bombardment. She had seen this before, not the same enemy, Not the same weapons, but the same story. The Malthari had been peaceful, too peaceful. Their technology was elegant, their society built on harmony with the cosmos. Wind-carved towers humming with bioluminescent energy, ships that moved like living things through the void. They had no standing armies, no weapons beyond what was needed for defense. And when the first enemy warships darkened their skies, they had called for aid. Their allies had abandoned them. Jessica's fingers tightened around the edge of the holotank. The data stream flickered, showing the last desperate broadcast from the Malthari High Council, a plea, not for soldiers, not for vengeance, but for witnesses, so someone would remember them when they were gone. Langford exhaled sharply beside her. "Command's really going with neutral?" She didn't answer. The Oblivion's edge hummed around them, its dark hull drinking in the starlight, its weapons silent but waiting. Humanity had no treaties here, no debts. No reason to throw themselves into a war that wasn't theirs. But then, they never waited for permission. The Malthari hadn't asked for protectors. Jessica turned her head slightly, watching the reflection of the dying world in Langford's eyes. He understood, they all did. "Prep the jump," she said softly. Somewhere below, on the broken surface, a Malthari scientist named Thalolan was still transmitting, his voice cracking with static and grief. Somewhere above, a Malthari commander named Malvar was still fighting, his ships outnumbered, his people burning, and Humanity was coming. The Oblivion's edge tore through the void like a blade through silk, its dark hull swallowing the light of distant stars. Inside, the ship was a cathedral of quiet tension. No alarms, no shouted orders, just the hum of engines and the rhythmic pulse of navigation beacons. The crew moved with the precision of a predator stalking prey, their silence more unnerving than any battle cry. Jessica Vala stood at the heart of it, her fingers hovering over the tactical display. The Malthari homeworld spun in holographic agony before her, its once vibrant auroras now choked beneath the smoke of orbital bombardment. The enemy fleet hung above it like carrion birds, their sleek, predatory silhouettes stark against the planet's dying glow. She had seen this before, not here, not these people. But the pattern was the same. The strong devouring the weak, the indifferent turning away. The Malthari had no warriors left, no grand armada to meet the invaders. Their ships were delicate things, woven from crystalline alloys and flowing energy conduits, built for beauty, not war. Their last transmission had been a whisper in the dark, a plea sent blindly into the abyss, and humanity had answered. Behind her, Langford shifted, his armor a dull gleam in the dim light. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The question hung between them like a blade. What now? Jessica's eyes flicked to the tactical readout. The enemy outnumbered them 20-1. Their weapons were calibrated for annihilation, their tactics honed through centuries of conquest. By every metric, this was suicide. But then, humans had a habit of rewriting the rules. She tapped a command, and the Oblivion's edge shuddered as its systems awakened. Across the hull, panels slid open, revealing not the crude barrels of conventional cannons, but something far worse. The Malthari had never built weapons like these. The enemy fleet wouldn't see them coming. Far below, Thalolan crouched in the ruins of his observatory, his delicate fingers trembling over the shattered remains of a data console. The air smelled of ionized metal and burning crystal. Outside, the sky burned. He had stopped transmitting hours ago. There was no point. No one was coming. A shadow passed over the sun. At first, he thought it was another enemy warship, another wave of destruction. But this was different. This ship was dark. A silhouette against the fire. Its edges sharp and then the sky screamed. Thalolan staggered back as the heavens split open. Not with the familiar purple, white fury of Malthari energy lances, but with something alien, something brutal. Beams of searing crimson slashed through the enemy formation, not burning, not cutting, erasing. Where they struck, ships simply ceased to exist, their hulls disintegrating into clouds of superheated particles. The invaders scattered, their formations breaking like startled prey. Thalolan's breath caught, then the calm crackled to life. A voice, rough and human, speaking in halting but unmistakable Malthari. "Hold on, we're coming down." Above him, the dark ship descended like a storm. The Malthari survivors huddled beneath the fractured crystal spires of their ruined city, their bioluminescent markings flickering with exhaustion and fear. Thalolan could feel their despair like a physical weight, the crushing certainty that this was the end. The invaders had burned their allies, shattered their defenses, and left them to die. And then the humans came, the dark ship. Their ship descended through the smoke, choked sky, its angular hull drinking in the light. It was nothing like the flowing organic designs of Malthari vessels. This was a thing of brutal efficiency, all hard edges and blackened armor, its surface scarred from battles fought in places Thalolan could scarcely imagine. As it landed, the ground trembled, Thalolan's breath hitched. He had studied the humans from afar, dismissed them as reckless, violent, too primitive to matter. Now standing before their war machine, he realized how wrong he had been. The ramp lowered with the hiss of pressurized hydraulics. The first human to step out was a woman, tall, armored in matte, black plating that absorbed the ambient glow of the dying city. Her face was obscured by a visored helmet, but the way she moved spoke of lethal precision. Behind her, more soldiers emerged, their weapons humming with restrained energy. Thalolan's people flinched. They had seen enough weapons today, but the humans did not raise them. Instead, the woman, Major Jessica Vala, her rank insignia glowed faintly on her pauldron, removed her helmet. Her face was human, yes, but her eyes. They burned with something Thalolan had not seen in a long time. She spoke, her voice carrying over the wind. "We heard you, that was all. No grand declarations, no demands, just 4 words that carried the weight of an oath." Thalolan's mind reeled. The humans had heard them. Not just their distress signal, but the unspoken plea beneath it. The galaxy had turned its back on the Malthari. The humans had not. Behind Vala, another figure stepped forward, Sergeant Richard Langford, his armor scuffed from recent combat. He carried a device in his hands, a compact emitter humming with unfamiliar energy. Without a word, he activated it. A shimmering dome of blue light expanded outward, enveloping the survivors. Thalolan gasped as the pain in his lungs eased. The humans had just deployed an atmospheric stabilizer, a piece of technology the Malthari had lost in the first wave of bombings. Vala's gaze swept over the ruins, then locked onto Thalolan. "Where are the rest of your people?" Thalolan hesitated. Trust did not come easily, not after betrayal. But the humans had not come with empty hands. They had come with answers. He pointed toward the underground shelters, where the last of his species cowered in the dark. Vala nodded once. "Then let's get them out." And just like that, the pact was made. Not in words, not in treaties, but in action. The humans had arrived too late to prevent the fall, but they were here now, and they would not let the Malthari die. The Malthari had never seen war like this. Their cities had fallen in silence. Great crystalline spires, collapsing under the weight of orbital bombardments, their elegant aerogel structures dissolving into violet mist under the enemy's relentless plasma lances. The attackers had struck without warning, without mercy, and without the decency to even declare their purpose. The Malthari were scholars, diplomats, architects of flowing organic technology that sang with the harmony of the cosmos. They had no soldiers, no warriors, and now they had no hope, or so they had thought. The human dropships descended like falling stars, their thrusters carving molten scars into the ruined landscape. The Malthari survivors huddled in the underground shelters, their bioluminescent markings dimmed with fear, their delicate hands trembling. Thololan could feel their terror like a living thing, a suffocating weight pressing against his chest. Above them, the battle had already begun. Malvar, his once pristine silver carapace now cracked and scorched, watched through the fractured remains of a surveillance node. His mind, trained for logic and precision, struggled to process what he was seeing. The humans moved like nothing he had ever witnessed. They did not glide with the elegant efficiency of Malthari constructs. They did not fight with the cold, calculated precision of the invaders. They burned. Sergeant Richard Langford was the first to engage. The enemy had sent a scouting unit, a detachment of sleek, angular drones that skimmed above the ruins, their weapons humming with lethal intent. Langford didn't wait for orders. He didn't hesitate. He charged. His powered armor roared as it propelled him forward, servos whining under the strain. The Malthari had never seen such a machine, a brutal amalgamation of ceramite plating and hydraulic fury, its surface scarred from battles fought in the void. Langford's rifle barked once, twice, and the lead drone exploded in a shower of molten shrapnel. The others reacted instantly, their weapons pivoting toward him. They never got the chance to fire. Major Jessica Vala's voice crackled over the comms, calm and razor-edged, suppression pattern delta. The rest of her squad moved as one. Railgun rounds tore through the air at hypersonic speeds, punching through drone armor like paper. Plasma grenades detonated in midair, their concussive blasts sending shockwaves rippling through the ruins. The humans fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. No wasted motion, no hesitation, only relentless, brutal efficiency. Malvar's breath caught in his throat. This was not war as the Malthari understood it. This was annihilation, and the humans were winning. Thololan stumbled forward, his thin fingers clutching at Malvar's arm. They're killing them," he whispered, his voice trembling. Malvar could only nod. The enemy had come to exterminate the Malthari. The humans had come to exterminate them. Above the battlefield, something shifted. The sky darkened as a new presence entered the fray, a shadow blotting out the pale violet light of the Malthari homeworld. Not one of theirs, not one of the enemies. Its hull was a nightmare of angular plating and weaponized fury, its engines burning with the blue-white fire of contained stars. It descended like a god of vengeance, its guns already tracking. Vala's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and final. "Fire mission authorized." The sky screamed. The world turned to fire. The Malthari had been architects of beauty. Their cities were not built. They were grown crystalline spires rising from the planets, crust like frozen auroras, their surfaces catching the light in cascading fractals of violet and silver. Their technology flowed like liquid, bioluminescent veins pulsing through translucent structures, humming with the quiet song of atmospheric ionization. They had never known war, not truly, until the Devourers came. They arrived without warning, their ships blackening the sky like a swarm of locusts. The Malthari had no standing army, no weapons beyond the tools they used to shape their world. Their allies, those who had once praised their artistry, their scientific marvels, abandoned them. The galactic consensus was clear. The Malthari were not worth dying for. Thololan had been among the last of his people to resist despair. He remembered the final hours in the Grand Spire, the air thick with the scent of ionized panic, the council's voices trembling as they debated surrender. Thololan had stood before them, his slender frame shaking, his voice a whisper against the storm. "We will not survive if we beg," he had said. So instead, they had done the only thing left to them. They had cast their plea into the void. A single transmission, broadcast on every frequency, in every language they could decipher. A cry for help sent blindly into the dark. They had not expected an answer, humanity heard. Major Jessica Vala had been on the bridge of the UNS Vanguard when the signal reached them, distorted by distance, but unmistakable in its desperation. She had listened to the translation in silence, her fingers tightening around the armrests of her command chair. The Malthari were not warriors. but humanity was. Sergeant Richard Langford had been planetside when the call came through, halfway through a 12-hour leave on Mars. He remembered the way the bars had gone quiet, the way the news feeds had flickered with images of the Maltharis dying cities. He remembered the silence that followed, the kind of silence that came before a storm. Then the mobilization orders hit. The Vanguard had been the first to jump. Vala had looked at the tactical display, at the swarm of enemy ships choking the Malthari homeworld's orbit, and made a decision. Weapons free, she said, and the architects of beauty watched as the architects of war descended from the sky. The Malthari had never seen a human warship before. Their own vessels were things of flowing silver and aurora. Bright energy, their hulls shaped by the same winds that carved their crystalline cities. They moved with a dancer's grace, their weapons designed to disable, not destroy. The UNS Vanguard was not graceful. It tore into the system like a blade through silk, its angular hull blackened by the scars of 100 battles. Where Malthari ships shimmered, it absorbed light. Where their energy pulsed in delicate streams, the Vanguard's reactors burned like contained supernovas, their heat bleeding through the radiation shielding in angry crimson veins. Malvar, the Malthari commander, stood frozen on the observation deck of his crippled flagship, his bioluminescent markings flickering in distress. He had expected reinforcements from the Galactic Accord, swift, elegant ships that would interpose themselves between the invaders and his people, that would negotiate, that would mediate. This was not mediation. This was annihilation. The human vessel did not hail the enemy fleet. It did not demand surrender. It simply activated. Across its dorsal spine, armored plates slid aside, revealing row upon row of missile silos. Along its flanks, railgun batteries unfolded like the spines of some ancient predator. And at its heart, something darker stirred. A weapon whose energy signature made the Malthari's atmospheric sensors scream in warning. Thalolin, their chief scientist, whispered something in their native tongue, the words trembling. Malvar did not need a translation. This is not a ship. This is a promise. Then the Vanguard fired. The first volley was a storm of tungsten rods, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. They struck the lead enemy cruiser before its shields could recalibrate, punching through its organic hull like bullets through glass. Atmosphere vented in frozen plumes, the ship's bioluminescent lights flickering and dying. The second volley was plasma, searing arcs of blue, white fury that carved through formation lines, melting armor, boiling away entire decks. Then came the third weapon. The Malthari had no name for it. The humans did. Rods from God. Kinetic kill vehicles, dropped from orbit with pinpoint accuracy. They struck the enemy fleet's command hub, and for a single, terrible second, the void itself seemed to bend under the impact. The explosion was soundless, but Malvar felt it in his bones, in the way his ship shuddered from the shockwave. When the light faded, the enemy's flagship was gone. The Lowland's voice was barely audible. They didn't even hesitate. Malvar watched as the Vanguard moved again, turning its attention to the remaining hostiles. Its engines flared, not with the Malthari's gentle ionization trails, but with the raw, unfiltered thrust of fusion fire. He had thought his people were doomed. Now, he realized something far more terrifying. The humans had never come to save them. They had come to end the war. The Malthari had always known the void as a silent, sacred expanse, a place of contemplation, of gentle ion trails and whispered prayers to the stellar winds. But now, the void screamed. Malvar stood frozen on the bridge of the luminous tide, his crystalline fingers pressed against the observation pane. The human warship, the Vanguard, moved like nothing he had ever seen. It didn't glide, it didn't flow. It punched through space, its engines vomiting raw fire, its hull scorched black from the heat of its own wrath. Behind it, something worse emerged. At first, the Malthari sensors registered only distortions, ripples in the dark, like heat haze over desert stone. Then, one by one, the distortions resolved into shapes. Dozens of them. No, Hundreds. Thalolan's breath hitched as the data streamed in. These were not the sleek, organic curves of Malthari vessels, nor even the brutal symmetry of the Vanguard. These were ghosts, hulks of blackened metal, their silhouettes jagged, their hulls pockmarked with scars of ancient wars. Some bore names in human script, half eroded by time: Un's retribution, Un's wrath of soul, Un's last breath. They were derelicts, graveyard ships, and they were awake. Malvar's mind reeled. The humans had not just come with one warship, they had come with a fleet of the dead, dragged back from the abyss. Thalolan's voice trembled. They reactivated them. The Malthari had always believed in the sanctity of the fallen. To repurpose the dead was unthinkable, a desecration. But the humans had done it anyway. The derelicts moved with eerie precision, their thrusters firing in unison, their weapon ports humming to life. They were slower than the Vanguard, their systems ancient, their armor brittle. But they did not need to be fast. They only needed to be enough. Malvar watched as the first wave of the Ghost Fleet engaged. Their weapons were outdated, their shields weak. But they did not fight like individual ships. They fought like a pack. One would take a hit, drawing fire, while another slipped past, unloading a barrage of kinetic slugs into an enemy's exposed flank. A third would ram a crippled foe, dragging it down into mutual annihilation. Then the Vanguard struck again. It plunged into the heart of the enemy formation, its railguns roaring, its plasma lances carving through hulls like a blade through water. The derelicts followed, swarming like carrion birds, tearing into wounded prey. Malvar felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not a battle. This was an execution. The humans had not come to save the Malthari. They had come to teach the galaxy what happened to those who harmed the weak, and they had brought the dead to bear witness. The battle ended in silence, not the quiet of peace, but the hollow stillness that follows a storm, when the thunder has faded, but the air still hums with the memory of violence. Malvar stood on the observation deck of the Vanguard, his crystalline fingers pressed against the reinforced glass. Below him, the wreckage of the enemy fleet drifted in a graveyard of shattered hulls and cooling plasma. The human derelicts, those that remained, hung motionless among the debris, their engines dark, their weapons spent. They had fought until the last breath of power left their reactors, until their hulls cracked under the strain. And then they had died. Again, Malvar had seen war before. The Malthari were no strangers to conflict, though they had long since abandoned the brutality of open battle. But this was something else. The humans had not just defeated their enemies. They had erased them, and they had done it with corpses. A soft chime sounded behind him. Thalolan approached. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed in reverence. She did not speak. She did not need to. The weight of what they had witnessed pressed between them, heavier than any gravity, while Malvar exhaled, his breath fogging the glass. They did not hesitate, he murmured. Thalolan's tendrils coiled tight against her neck. No, they did not. A pause, then, softer. Would we have? Malvar had no answer. The Malthari had begged for aid. They had sent pleas across the stars, their transmissions laced with desperation. Their allies had turned away. Their protectors had abandoned them. Only the humans, strangers, outsiders, monsters in the eyes of the galaxy had answered, and they had come with the dead at their backs. A flicker of movement caught his eye. On the far side of the debris field, a human dropship detached from the Vanguard, its thrusters flaring violet in the dark. It moved with purpose, weaving through the wreckage, heading for one of the derelicts, a cruiser, its spine broken, its hull scorched black. Malvar frowned. What are they doing? Thalolan activated the deck's external scanners, the holographic display shimmering to life. The feed resolved into a grainy image. Human figures in armored suits, moving through the derelict's corpse. They moved slowly, deliberately. Their movements weighted with something Malvar could not name. Then he saw it. One of the humans knelt beside a skeletal frame, still strapped into a pilot's chair. A long-dead crewman, his flesh gone to dust. His uniform fused to the metal beneath him. The armored figure reached out, gloved fingers brushing the brittle remains of a helmet. And then, with infinite care, they lifted the dead from their throne. Malvar's breath caught. They were recovering them, not as scrap, not as tools to be discarded. Thalolan made a sound, a soft, wounded thing. They brought their fallen to battle, and now they take them home. Malvar felt something fracture inside him. The galaxy called humans reckless, savage, unpredictable, but no one had ever called them faithful. And that, he realized with a slow, dawning horror, was the true miscalculation. The humans did not fight for conquest. They fought for the dead, and that made them unstoppable. The Malthari command spire hummed with the low resonant pulse of ionized air, its crystalline walls flickering with aurora. Light as Malvar stood motionless before the observation array. The holographic display before him painted the void in shades of violet and silver, the wreckage of the battle, the drifting hulks of dead ships, and among them, the human vessels moving with methodical, reverent purpose. They were still out there, still collecting their dead. Malvar's claws flexed against the smooth, aerogel surface of the console. The humans had won. The enemy fleet lay broken, their advance halted, their weapons silenced. By every metric of war, the battle was over. And yet, the humans did not leave. Thalolan's voice was quiet beside him, the scientist's bioluminescent markings dimmed in contemplation. They could have withdrawn hours ago. Their shields are depleted, their fuel reserves must be critical. Malvar said nothing. He had seen the same tactical readouts. The humans had no reason to linger in this graveyard of metal and plasma burns. No strategic reason. On the display, one of the human salvage teams moved through the carcass of a gutted cruiser, their armored forms backlit by the flickering emergency lights of the derelict. They moved with the same deliberate care they had shown before, lifting corpses from twisted bulkheads, carrying shattered remains back to their ships with gloved hands that never faltered. Malvar had fought in a dozen campaigns. He had seen warriors of 100 species revel in victory or flee in defeat. He had never seen an army mourn in the wreckage of a battle they had already won. "This is inefficient," Thalolan murmured. Though there was no judgment in the words, only confusion. They risk secondary explosions, radiation, hull breaches. For what? Malvar exhaled, his crest of spines tightening. For the dead. That was the answer, wasn't it? The humans had come to this system not for conquest, not for territory, but because the Malthari had called for aid, and now, even in victory, they did not leave. Because leaving meant abandoning those who had fought beside them, even the ones who would never breathe again. A chime sounded from the console, an incoming transmission. Malvar hesitated, then activated the channel. The human commander's face resolved in the air before him. Major Jessica Vala's features were drawn, her dark eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But her voice was steady. "Commander Malvar, we've located the last of our missing. Not corpses, not casualties." Malvar inclined his head. "Your efforts are noted." The words felt inadequate. He had no framework for this, no precedent. Vala's gaze flickered to something beyond the feed, perhaps to the same wreckage Malvar saw on his display. "We'll be departing within the hour. But before we do," she paused, then continued, softer, "we've recovered Malthari remains as well. We'd like to return them to you." Thalolan made a sound, a sharp, startled exhale. Malvar felt his own pulse stutter. They had gathered the Malthari dead. Not as spoils, not as trophies. The galaxy had dismissed humans as reckless, as violent as creatures of chaos. But chaos did not bury its dead. Malvar closed his eyes, The mistake had never been in fearing humanity's wrath. It had been in failing to understand their mercy. The Malthari command spire hummed with the low resonant pulse of atmospheric condensers, their crystalline surfaces catching the pale violet light of the dying system star. Malvar stood before the central hololith, its streaming auroras casting jagged reflections across his silvered carapace. The humans had left hours ago, their warships vanishing into the void, with the same terrifying silence with which they had arrived. And yet, their absence was louder than their presence had ever been. The Lowland's fingers danced across the bioluminescent interface, her movements sharp with something Malvar had not seen in her before. Urgency, yes, but beneath it, something far more dangerous. Hope, the last of the remains have been processed, she murmured. The words were ritual, automatic. Her true focus lay elsewhere. Malvar did not need to ask. The same thought coiled between them, unspoken. Why had the humans come? Why had they fought? Why had they gathered the Malthari dead with the same reverence they showed their own? The galaxy had answers for such things. Mercenaries fought for profit. Conquerors fought for dominion. The desperate fought for survival. But the humans had asked for nothing. A chime fractured the silence. The lowland stiffened, her crest flaring as the hololith flickered, its flowing energy currents distorting. Commander, her voice was a blade's edge. Malvar turned. The signal was faint, fractured by interference, a distress pulse, repeating on a frequency the Malthari had long abandoned. No one monitored those bands anymore. No one answered them, or so they had thought. The Lowland's claws trembled as she isolated the transmission. It was old, years old, sent in the first days of the genocide, when the Malthari had screamed into the dark, begging for aid from allies who had already turned away. And now, impossibly, a response. Malvar's blood cooled as the message resolved. It was human, not a warship's identifier, not a military code, just a single phrase, translated with the clumsy precision of a species still learning the intricacies of galactic communication. We hear you, dated 3 cycles past. The same day the first human vessels had altered course toward Malthari space. The Lowland exhaled, her bioluminescence flickering. They heard us. Malvar stared at the words, the simplicity of them, the enormity. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as reckless, as violent, as creatures who knew only war. But war did not listen to the cries of the forgotten, and mercy did not come too late. The hololith shimmered, its auroras bleeding into violet. Somewhere beyond the ruined edges of their system, the humans were still moving, still watching, still answering calls. No one else would. Malvar closed his eyes. The mistake had never been in fearing what humanity would destroy. It had been in failing to see what they would protect. The first human ships emerged from the void like silent specters, their hulls dark against the swirling auroras of the Maltharis dying star. Malvar watched from the fractured observation spire, his crystalline fingers pressed against the translucent pane. The human vessels were unlike anything the Malthari had seen before, not sleek and flowing like the organic designs of the galactic powers, nor adorned with the luminous elegance of their own wind-carved aesthetics. These were angular, brutal things, armored in matte, black alloys that drank in the light rather than reflected it. Their silhouettes bristled with weapon mounts, their engines burning not with the soft purple, white ionization of civilized species, but with the harsh, unrefined blue of raw fusion fire. They moved with purpose, not the slow, ceremonial approach of a diplomatic envoy, not the cautious advance of a species testing unfamiliar space. They moved like predators who had already decided where the battle lines were drawn. The Lowland's bioluminescence pulsed erratically beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "They're not stopping." Malvar didn't answer. He didn't need to. The human fleet wasn't slowing for negotiations, wasn't hailing for permissions. They were cutting straight through the debris field of the last Malthari defense platform, their formation tightening like a fist. A single ship broke from the pack, smaller, sleeker, its hull scarred from engagements the Malthari could only guess at. It angled toward the spire, its thrusters flaring as it matched orbit. Malvar's breath caught. This close. He could see the damage, the pockmarks of kinetic strikes along its flanks. The jagged, half-repaired gashes where energy weapons had torn through armor. This was not some pristine warship fresh from a shipyard. This was a veteran, a survivor. The comm panel flickered to life, its crystalline surface shimmering with the crude, unrefined signal of a human transmission. No elegant data stream, no harmonic pulse, just a voice, rough and unadorned. Malthari command. This is Major Jessica Vala of the Terran Defense Vanguard. We're coming in. No request, no question. A statement. The lowlands tendrils coiled tight. They're boarding. Malvar exhaled, his own bioluminescence dimming. They're not waiting for an invitation. The humans didn't trust the Malthari to hold the line, didn't trust their broken defenses, their faltering shields. They were coming to stand with them, or die for them. The docking clamps shuddered as the human vessel locked onto the spire's crippled airlock. The mechanisms groaned, strained, then gave way with a hiss of pressurized gas. The first human to step through was armored head to toe in matte, black plating, her visor a blank reflective slate. She moved with the controlled precision of someone who had done this 100 times before, her rifle slung low but ready. Behind her, more figures emerged, some in full combat gear, others in lighter suits marked with medical insignias. No fanfare, no speeches, just motion. Malvar straightened, his spines flexing in what he hoped they would recognize as respect. Major Vala, she didn't bow, didn't offer the traditional Malthari gesture of peace. She just nodded. Where do you need us? The lowland made a sound like fracturing crystal. The galaxy had called humanity reckless, called them violent. But violence did not cross the void to save strangers, and recklessness did not stand in the path of annihilation without hesitation. Malvar looked at the humans, really looked at them. At the scars on their armor, the exhaustion in their stances, the quiet, unshakable certainty in their eyes. They had not come to negotiate, they had come to fight. And if necessary, to fall. He turned toward the tactical display, his voice steady for the first time in cycles. Everywhere, the Malthari command center hummed with an unfamiliar energy, not the cool, precise flow of their crystalline systems, but something raw and electric. Human engineers moved among the alien consoles, their hands dancing across interfaces never meant for five-fingered touch. They worked without hesitation, adapting with a speed that made the lowlands' neural filaments tremble. This is what desperation looks like when forged into purpose. Malvar watched as Major Vala studied the tactical hologram, her gaze tracing the swarm of enemy signatures closing in on the last Malthari strongholds. The projection cast jagged violet light across her face, etching the scars there into something sharper. She didn't flinch at the numbers, didn't balk at the odds. She simply exhaled. Then she turned to her soldiers. No orders were shouted, no grand speeches given. Just a glance, a silent language of nods and tightened jaws. The humans moved like a single organism, dispersing to the defense grids, the hangars, the triage stations. They slotted themselves into the gaps of a crumbling civilization as if they had always belonged there. Sergeant Langford paused beside the lowland, his armor still streaked with carbon scoring from the journey. "Show me your shield harmonics," he said, his voice gravel, edged but calm. The lowland hesitated. The Malthari energy matrices were elegant, fragile things, designed for efficiency, not war. To expose their workings felt like bearing an open nerve, but Langford's eyes held no mockery, only focus. So Thalolan accessed the core schematics, the luminous data spiraling between them. Langford's fingers flickered through the projections. "Your bleeding power here and here." He marked the flaws with blunt precision. "We can reinforce the conduits, but ITEL mean rerouting through non-optimal pathways. Non-optimal. The lowlands' frills stiffened. The system could destabilize. Yeah, but ITL hold long enough. Langford grinned, a flash of teeth in the dim light. We're good at long enough. Beyond the crystalline walls, the first enemy salvos began to fall. The Malthari shields flared under the assault, their graceful auroras fracturing into desperate sparks. But where the aliens saw collapse, the humans saw rhythm. Vala's voice cut through the chaos, steady as a blade. Time the surges. Let them think they're winning. Malvar felt it then. The shift. The Malthari had fought with precision, with calculation. The humans fought like the tide. They let the enemy press, let them commit, and then the counterstrike erupted. Human-modified railguns fired not in salvos, but in cascades, their projectiles striking in perfect sequence to shatter enemy shields. Plasma lances, jury, rigged into the Malthari power grid, carved through advancing fleets like lightning, and when the enemy adapted, when they tightened formation to overwhelm the defenses, the humans detonated their own outer batteries. The explosion tore a hole in the battlefield, swallowing ships in a firestorm of shattered alloy and ionized gas. Vala hadn't hesitated, hadn't waited for consensus. Shed burned their own weapons to buy time. The lowlands' mind reeled. This is madness, but the enemy advance stalled. Malvar looked at Vala, really looked. Her hands were clenched, her breathing controlled. She wasn't reckless, she was ruthless, not with cruelty, but with necessity. Every decision, every sacrifice, measured against the lives behind her. And in that moment, he understood the galaxy had called humanity violent. But violence could be a shield. The enemy regrouped, their formations shifting for a final push. The lowland system screamed with overload warnings. Vala didn't flinch. Again, the humans moved. And the Malthari, for the first time in their history, moved with them.